the best. Okay, so let's start with, okay, Margaret, and then if you could ping pong it to somebody else.
Hi, I'm Margaret Shuftick. I'm the director of Newbridge School. We are a non-public school based in Poway, California, which is right adjacent to San Diego. I will ping pong it to Carrie. Oh, there she is.
Hi, I'm Carrie Donahue. I'm a team leader and a test site coordinator for Newbridge School in Poway. And I will pass it to Melanie.
So if everybody could unmute.
Took me a while to find my mute button. I'm Melanie Martinez. I'm assistant principal at Creekside Junior High in Los Baños, California. Oh, and I will ping pong it to Dr. Rivera.
I was just about to rename myself. I'll do after. I'm Chelsea. I'm a wellness instructor at Geffen Academy, which is a secondary school at UCLA's campus. And I will ping pong it to Carolina.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Carolina Moreno. I am principal at Creekside Junior High in Los Baños. And I will ping pong it to Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura Haney. I am a 9th grade and 12th grade physics teacher at Vistamar School in El Segundo. And I will bounce it to the other Laura.
Excuse me. Hi, I'm Laura Brady. I'm a principal for a kinder through 6th grade elementary school in Los Baños, California. And I will ping pong it to Virginia.
Hi, I'm Virginia Lee. I'm located in Los Angeles. I'm the Senior Director for Community Engagement and Partnerships at a nonprofit called Partnership for LA Schools. So we basically manage and operate 20 LAUSD schools. How about Lindsay?
Hi, I'm Lindsay Cross. I am the 7th through 9th grade director at Sierra Canyon School, which is in Chatsworth. Bailey, have you gone yet? Okay, I'm gonna bounce it to Bailey.
Hi there, I'm Bailey Kwan. I work at Newbridge School in Poway, also with Margaret and Carrie, the assistant director, and we work with kiddos with language-based issues. I will ping pong it to Lori.
Good evening, I'm Lori Reel. I am the principal of Fremont Union High School District Adult School in Sunnyvale, California. And I will ping pong it to Cynthia. You're muted, Cynthia.
Oh, sorry. My child is here asking me questions. I'm Dr. Gonzalez. I have been an educator with LAUSD for about 20 years. Actually, 3 of those were at Roosevelt High School with the Partnership for LA Schools when they had the 7 small schools on the campus. Just ended my 8-year principalship at Diego Rivera in South Central Los Angeles, but most of my 20 years in South Central working with students. And I am currently the director of pilot school support within the district, which are schools that have charter-like autonomies within LA Unified.
And you've also run for office.
Yeah, I ran for a school board, got the LA Times endorsement, and then I ran for community college board, lost both times. Yay.
It's tough. Okay, who's next? How about Allison?
Hi, good evening. Thank you. I was having a little audio issues, so I'm joining a tad bit late. Good evening. I'm Assistant Superintendent for Student Services in Montebello. I don't know who has gone yet or who hasn't gone yet, so I'll just pick and let's see, Rebecca, have you gone?
Yeah, I'm driving, but I'm going to introduce myself. Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry. I had a late principals meeting. My name is Rebecca Harris. I'm principal of Dickinson Elementary in Compton Unified.
Okay, who hasn't gone yet? among the participants in the academy. Have we missed anybody? Elvira, did we get you?
No. Elvira Gutzweiler, assistant principal at Creekside Junior High School in Los Banos.
Great, and we didn't get Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Rubin. I'm the Director of College Counseling at Sierra Canyon School in Chatsworth. And I'm going to throw it to Deborah. You haven't gone yet, right?
I'm Deborah Bouvet. I'm the K-8 principal of a school in Chino. And I will pass it over to Sharman.
Hi, I'm Sharman Evans. I'm the executive director at a charter school in Camarillo, California.
And it's on the CSU campus there? Or
We're
no?
not on the campus, but we are a partner. We're a professional development school with the university. Yes.
Okay, did we get everybody? Okay, so we got one of the speakers, Cynthia Gonzalez, and I'd like to have the other three introduce themselves. Laura, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Konigsberg. I'm the head of school at Turning Point School, which is an independent preschool through grade 8 school in Culver City. I've been here for 6 years, and I came here from the Bay Area, where I worked for a very long time at a K-12 school, it was a 2-campus school. I worked on the lower school and middle school campus, eventually running that campus as associate head of school. And before that, I'd spent really the majority of my career in an upper school in a high school setting at that school, Bentley School in the East Bay, where I did everything from English teacher to dean of students to director of teaching and learning to school counselor. I have a doctorate in English and a master's degree in counseling psychology. So I was able to fill many different positions and kept growing in that one school, finally being the assistant head of the upper school, moved to the other campus, and then came here. So I've really had experience in educational settings from preschool through undergraduate university, and just really excited to talk with you all tonight. It's such a rich mix of many different backgrounds from other independent school colleagues. I heard Sierra Canyon and Vistamar and Geffen, to charter schools and LA Unified and other unified. So I think we can have a really interesting and rich conversation this evening, and I look forward to learning as much as sharing my own experiences with school leadership.
Great, thank you. Cristina.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Cristina De Jesus. I am the CEO of Green Dot Public Schools California. It is a charter management organization with 19 middle and high schools and close to 11,000 students. I'm also the chair of the California Charter Schools Association, the association that represents about 1,300 charter schools across the state of California. I've been at Green Dot. I'm finishing my 20th year. I started as the founding principal of our second school and have just kind of stayed ever since, moving into different roles. And prior to that was a 6th and 7th grade teacher at Santa Monica Malibu School District, teaching English and history and some other electives. Also excited to be here with all of you and talk about the impossible task of, in this moment, managing personal and professional balance.
Great, thank you. Pam.
Hi, everybody. I'm Pam Magee, and I'm the executive director and principal at Palisades Charter High School. It's a fascinating dual role that I've held for the last decade. Kind of, I guess, to get to this place, I was a teacher and started in Mississippi and moved actually to Georgia. So California is my third state as an educator, English teacher, always primarily in high school settings, but have taught all levels and all variations of English and literature and literacy. And then and also went to law school and thought that was going to be my career choice, but have found that as an administrator in a school, I use all of that experience quite a bit. So I was really glad to have that in my background and in my toolbox. In my time in California, I have actually been in Manhattan Beach, Culver City, Oak Park, all small districts that each have similarities. And then now at an independent charter school that in essence functions as its own small school district as well, with all functions housed on our site, whether that's operations, facilities, human resources, all, we do everything in-house. So it's a busy buzzing operation. We've got 3,000 students on site, but most of them don't come from our immediate Pacific Palisades. They either travel from 100 zip codes from across Los Angeles. So always something interesting and never exactly what you've planned for. And super excited to be here with you tonight, like hearing all of your diverse backgrounds. It's like, again, just great to be with folks who also bring a lot to the table and really interested in learning from you tonight as well.
Thanks, Pam. Cynthia, is there anything else you want to say?
No, I think I've added all of it.
Okay, great. Okay, so tonight, as we've been saying, we're going to talk about navigating public and private lives in times of calm, in times of crisis. And then towards the end, we're going to talk about balance, if you can achieve balance. And that's a really hard question often. Okay, so let's talk about calm first. How do you separate your public life from your private life? And in thinking about three constituencies, other administrators, teachers, students, or students/parents. So do you have any practices that actually work for keeping a separation or that you used in times of calm? So not the past 2 years. They certainly haven't been calm. Anyone want to start off for us?
I guess I can begin. I guess maybe I have a different mindset than most. So even when I saw the prompts and the questions, I was like, oh, because I have a very, very public life. To the point where kids are on my social and are like, Miss, we see your TikToks, and I'm like, awesome. They're like, you keep making them, they're funny. I'm like, okay. But I'm also very community centered. So my ideal life would be where I live in the community where I'm serving and seeing families, having seen me in my public life, which because I ran for office, obviously when I'm navigating spaces, I see a lot of families that are heavily involved in their schools who were new of the campaign or were heavily involved, and I'm like grocery shopping or what have you. And I didn't live too far from my school in South Central. So I'm constantly in the area and do a lot of advocacy work there too. So the students and families know that I'm like very connected to the community and still do like a lot of work around those spaces. And so I will share things on social media. And so they'll have, they can see my family life and things like that, what I'm doing. I think it's never been really an issue. I haven't had an issue with it, although I know that there's like a lot of different things you need to be mindful of. I think now with my current position, I was a bit more outspoken about critiques that I might have, and I've had to dial those back and make more family and friend videos, just mostly to protect the schools that I'm supporting, because I don't want, anything to happen to them. But during my calm time, I think I'm pretty open. So my staff, family, students kind of know a lot about me. I bring my kids to school. And so my kids get to know my students and will ask about certain students to this day that they have close relationships with. So I don't know. I feel like I have such a different like mindset about my role as an educator in the community I serve.
Okay, one question. Who do you give your cell phone number to?
My cell phone number. Well, if I'm working on specific projects, so we had some students working on a presentation with Dr. Victor Rio. So they had my cell phone so I can make sure they knew how to log in and do all of that. If there are students that are in need or crisis, I have one who's one of our highly autistic kids who to this day, just yesterday, called me like 3 times for help, and he already graduated, but he'll call like to find out about college information, things like that. So there are kids, if we're taking them to events or something, obviously with all the correct forms completed, like I'll get my cell phone too, so they could, you know, text me where they're at so I can pick them up or whatever if they need transportation. So yeah, everybody has, I mean, aside from that, my cell phone number is on my district signature line and my email. So that's how all of my staff, all district staff really can reach me through my cell phone number.
Great.
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Who'd like to go next?
I think I might do, because I think I'm the exact polar opposite. So
Yeah, me too. But go ahead, Pam.
So, I mean, I think a lot of this is probably like personal. I mean, like, it's just like what your, maybe what your preferences are, what your personality is like, and also maybe the place that you serve. Always, I think we're all trying to be situational leaders and adapt. But again, most of the places I've served have been like small communities, and I've lived either in them or very close by. And also, I guess I would say, fairly demanding parent communities. And I actually have tried maybe to have like a little more delineation, and I applaud people who are on social media, because it's just not a talent or a gift that I possess. So I'm not out there on social media a lot, other than just like in representing the school. Personally, probably I'm on Facebook only to like research people that we might be hiring or things like that. So don't have a social media presence other than on LinkedIn, and but I love looking at other people's. But again, that's just kind of a little private side of myself. But in the conversation about who has your cell phone number, that was one of the greatest things that came out of COVID, I think, for our school, was getting a system where anyone anywhere can dial an office number, and it'll ring through to your personal line, so I can able to access that without ever having to give out my actual cell phone number. So I think that has been a great innovation for me and for our school. So if you have that, or something you can talk to an IT person about, ask for that. So you actually aren't having to maybe mix your personal phone numbers and cell phone with information that you're giving out to the public. But in that way, I can give it to everyone, and websites and everywhere else, and I feel comfortable about that. But I mean, again, I think for all of us, it's like that thing when you go to the grocery store, or whenever you're out and about at an event, maybe that's with your family, trying to figure out again, like how to interact with your school family. And sometimes the two mix well, and sometimes maybe you just want to have that moment that you can be in your personal world. So that's something that I'm always thinking about. I'm real sensitive to my husband and others who are part of that group, that sometimes that life is not necessarily what they ask for. So really trying to be sensitive to what the people who are in our families and in our groups, how much exposure they want. So that's again, it's really personal. I think you all have to give a little bit of thought to what works for you and for the people that you're with and that you're close to and that you love and protect.
So, yeah, I mean, I think I have maybe some similar constituent families and community to Pam, who's in the Palisades. I run an independent school. I'm sure you're all aware that, independent schools are financed by tuition. And so there's, families come to us, not to say there's not tuition assistance and a lot of support around access, but it's a different culture. And I think you have to be, when you think about what are your boundaries and what are you going to share publicly, you have to think about the culture of your school and your own sort of willingness and what you're willing to put out there, because once it's out there, you can't claw it back necessarily. And then also, I always think about projection, right? As the head of school, what are people projecting onto the role that I play? And the role that I play is really different from who I am as a person. And people come to you with their ideas about what a school administrator is, or what does it mean to be interacting with the head of school. And so I both want to model, I'm a parent and I'm a person, and I, struggle to raise my kids just like the parents at our school. And, but my children have been at my school, so they see me interacting in that way, but in a public sphere, I have very low social media personally and I don't connect with, I connect on a LinkedIn basis with people, but I don't, like, nobody does Facebook anymore. And I don't really do Instagram with anybody from my professional life, just to keep it separate, to keep it clean. I can then, I don't put my personal ideas out into the world, because as the head of school, I need to, stay out of, having a strong political stance, if you will, although I can have an ethical stance or a character-based stance. So unlike, Cynthia, whose context is so much more public, she is in the community, she is of the community. I'm a little more, I'm going to keep those a little bit more separate. I live in a neighborhood where sometimes I run into, if I'm walking up the hill to the neighborhood up on the hill, I might run into some families in my neighborhood when I'm walking my dog or whatever, and they see me wearing sweats, or and that, they get to see a different side of me, but I'm not really giving that much away. Having a dog does not seem super controversial, or, it's sort of humanizing. And I would say with my cell phone, my administrative team has my cell phone. And remember, I'm a school of 300 students. And so I have a team of, 8 people who are my senior people. They all have my cell phone. Leadership of the parent association, they might have my cell phone. If somebody is leading a trip and they're out of the country, they'll have my cell phone. A teacher, even though ordinarily they might not have my cell phone. Families generally do not, but they certainly know that I'm on email all the time, and we can talk about when we get into the balance conversation, right? When you can turn some of that off, and is the answer never. But so I think that sort of that separation works for me. And I think it, again, in the context of my community, makes our families, I think, feel like the boundary maybe helps them feel safer or more comfortable as well, even though they're always looking for more access. Anyway, that's my take on it.
Great, thank you. Cristina.
So I'll say that I think in leadership, and I think specifically in education, because we're in the field of people and growing people, it is important for people you work alongside to see glimpses of your humanity. I do think that's important. They have to see you as human and know what that means. Obviously, putting boundaries around what that means, I think, is important. I think something the pandemic taught us, we got glimpses into each other's homes all day, every day. So whether it was a cat crawling across somebody's laptop or a toddler on a lap, we were reminded, oh, she's a mother, or he's a brother, or whatever the case may be. So I do think that humanity in the work is really critical. I try to keep that when at work to things centered on the work. So knowing your leadership story, why do you do what you do, pulling on that parts of that story in heated meetings or in important meetings to remind people, I always think of myself as a teacher. I'm in this work because my parents taught me about the importance of school choice. So, that's how I bring my personal into work, is really centering it around the work itself as much as possible. I will say I have 2 cell phones. I have a work cell phone and a personal cell phone. It's probably the best thing I ever did. So anybody and everybody, yes, has my work cell phone, but I can also go to the grocery store on a Saturday and not take it with me and have a moment of not worrying about what's coming up through that cell phone. So I do keep those 2 things separate. I am also, like Pam and Laura, I decided when I was a teacher, I think, was it like MySpace? I don't even remember what the social media was back then, but I made a conscious choice not to get on social media because I didn't want to have an awkward moment where a student wanted to friend me, I didn't want that level of responsibility. And I just carried that through. So I have a Twitter for work and a Twitter for Instagram, and they don't get much traffic. So, that's the extent of my social media footprint. The other thing I will say is two things. One is you really, in order to keep your personal, your private life private and your professional life professional, knowing who your mentors are and who you're going to lean on when you need someone, because you're going to need someone, and it can't be going into the office and telling your team about what a bad morning or day you had. And so thinking through, like, who am I going to lean on? And I think about, there's a book called What Great Principals Do. And one of the, I think it's either a chapter or it's a saying, and it says, when the principal sneezes, the whole school gets a cold. And really talking about the importance of leadership and how what you project out will then be reflected back to you, whether that's your school community or your organization. And so I try to be mindful of that. And just a reminder, as much as possible, to keep my professional hat, which is very personal. You know, the work we all do is very personal. So there's a lot of personal stuff in there while still creating boundaries.
Cristina, could you give us the name of that book again?
What Principals Do Differently. What Great Principals Do Differently. I'll get the author and put it in the chat.
Great, thank you. Okay.
I love that book.
Anybody have any questions? Please, it'd be great to have a discussion.
While you're thinking of questions, I was just reminded when Cristina was talking, I will say that even though I keep those boundaries, I think I do try to like she does, to sort of demonstrate that, you know, I am a human being behind the head of school sort of persona, right? So sometimes I will say, oh my gosh, you know, I did have a hard morning. I mean, I don't announce it to the whole school, but I might say to a colleague like, oh, you know, my child was so, you know, difficult this morning and we had such a hard time getting out the door, and, you know, or I need a minute, or so. I think, you know, just those, you said something about the glimpses, and I think that that's really important, that you don't want to be so removed that now they don't even see you as a person. The work is personal, but at the same time, this idea that, you know, firm, fair, and friendly, right? That when you walk out of your office, you take the deep breath and you're on all the time. And, you know, and that doesn't mean you can't shape the story and tell it to other people so that they feel that they are not alone in their own struggles, but you can't, you know, you can't sneeze because everyone else gets the cold, right? So it's such an interesting metaphor, especially during the pandemic, but I love that. And it was just making me think about using your personal life strategically sometimes so that other people feel like they can come to you and you will understand and you will be empathic because you've been there as well.
Great, thank you. Questions?
I have a question. Some of you mentioned that you have worked at schools where your own children were students. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about, I have a very young daughter who just started at school with me, and so far it's been lovely, but also, you know, she has a long road ahead of her at the school. So I'm curious to hear how you navigate, you know, some of the high points and then maybe some of the more challenging moments.
I would also love to hear something, because I'm in that same situation where my daughter goes to the same school. I have found that the hardest part is play dates, because I was trying, there's a boundary, but then you want to be a mom, and you want to be able to go, but then the parents want to ask you things about the school. And so then you want to say, oh, I'm just so-and-so's mom today. And I've also struggled with those boundaries and where is the line?
So I would say, I don't know if other people, I know, you know, Cristina runs a giant charter, you know, network of charter schools and maybe can go ahead, but I would, so I don't know if other people have direct experience on the panel with having their kids there, and I'll stop talking and let other people join in if you have that. But I would say, yes, you can, like, sometimes I will physically say like, I am wearing my parent hat today, and they'll push and I'll say like, no, I'm really not going to talk about that. Or I don't talk about what's going on at school on the weekends, but it is hard to have friends at the school where you work among the parents. And then the more you're going up the leadership chain, the fewer friends you have among colleagues at your school as well. So it can be lonely, and you can still do the play dates, but you have to be clear about what you will and will not say. And they will test you until they get the message. And then, when I became a head of school, it became harder. And I actually often just delegated those responsibilities to my husband so that I could because it felt like going to work. Now on the weekend, I'm going to work to the play day. Like, that was not working for me. So that is challenging. And I don't know that there's a real, I don't think there's a real solution. Like, you can't have the boundary and also be the friend. I will say, having, again, it's very humanizing when people see your child having a tantrum or, some interaction that makes you feel like you're not displaying sort of perfect motherhood or parenthood. My the students finally got to go on trips, and the 7th graders went to Vancouver, and my 7th grader was among them. And we got an email from the trip leader, who's one of my colleagues, who is a teacher and a grade level dean, doesn't report directly to me, but obviously everyone at the school is my employee, saying that my child had left their room in the middle of the night and had been found in a friend's room, hotel room, at 2 a.m, that the security guard had gotten my colleague out of bed to say that these kids were not where they were supposed to be. And, that was the child of the head of school, right? So on the one hand, sometimes there's this pressure to feel like you work at a school and your child should be the sort of model of, good behavior and easy. And I've found that is unfair pressure to put on a child who should be allowed to be a child like everybody else's child. And what I've done is I've just tried to be the parent that I want my parents to be at the school. So I responded with, of course, my husband and I were outraged and just said, like, this teacher was awakened in the middle of the night, that is, with a heart racing, adrenaline, because you were not where you were supposed to be. So there's going to be, and there was a consequence that they gave on the trip, and then we gave a consequence. But in our house, the teacher is always right. We're always going to side with the teacher. We don't. But overall, I would say it's wonderful to have them there, especially if you're working in a school, to make it the best school that you can make it, and having your children be able to be part of that community, and for them to see you at work and to have, I think there are a lot of positives. But when there are challenges, it's very challenging, because it's both personal and not personal, and you have to both model it and be yourself, so it's very tricky. But I think in the end, it's been worth it for our family, for whom the schools have been able to serve my children well.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
I'll share. It's Deborah. At the school where I'm principal, I've been at that school for 8 years, and so many of the teachers, their own children have gone through the school. And they even request them in their class,
Wow.
Which I think that's, to me, that's a little bit odd. Like what you said, Laura, that absolutely resonated with me. Just the unrealistic perception that some people might have. And a lot of the teachers ask me, well, I have 3 kids. Well, why don't you bring your kids here? They don't need that pressure. But I have to say that there's a culture in my school where if it's the teacher's, if it's the teacher's child, like those children do not go into the teacher's lounge. Those children do not use any of the facilities that are designated for the adults. There was one time, one teacher brought her child to the staff meeting. Yeah, that didn't work really well. So I had my assistant principal, I just pulled her on the side and I just told her, if she doesn't have childcare, just ask her to go home for today and, get the notes, and then there was one teacher. So there were 2 incidents. There was one teacher whose child was walking through the office with her, and the child put her hand in the candy bowl at the secretary's desk. It's like those little things, those little nuances that upset everybody. That upset the people in the office. And of course, the staff knew because everything that happens in the office, all the teachers know. So it's a balance. It's a balance, but I do have to say that it works for some people. It works for some people, but personally, no, I wouldn't do that. So thank you for that insight.
Okay, thank you.
So I just want to add, I have two kids. I was both their middle school and high school principal. So I was my daughter's middle school principal for 2 years, and then she moved up to the high school. Then I was my son's middle school principal, and I followed him to the high school. So I was literally his principal for 6 years, and all of his friends. And there's good and bad things. We had to have conversations about boundaries for me and boundaries for them. So, I had a very honest conversation with my daughter. She wasn't super thrilled when I was appointed to the high school principal. I really didn't have a choice. The superintendent came and said, you need to go there. And I said, okay. So chatted with my daughter about it. And at that point she was a junior. So she's like, well, Mother, why didn't you talk to me about this? And I was like, well, I am now. And, and I'm sorry, this is probably a huge blow to you, but we can talk about what those boundaries are going to look like. Cause I'm sure there's probably some things you don't want me to do as your mother. And there's some things that you have to do because you're my daughter. So we talked about the boundaries. Again, she wasn't super thrilled. My son was like, this is great. And I knew a lot of the kids. It was it wasn't a huge high school, only about 2,600 kids. So it wasn't like a ton, but it wasn't, super small either. So I knew a lot of the families. So the balance of work and family was difficult because I worked in this school. The PTA president was right across the street. But we would talk about, hey, it's okay to call me because I had a work phone, I had a personal phone. But if you could not do it on the weekends, but if there were emergencies and stuff like that, they would call me. So we had a lot of boundary talks. It's kind of a funny story. In the first day of school, when I got to the high school, my daughter talked about how I can't talk to her at school, and I can't talk to her friends. And I was like, oh, we'll see how long this lasts. But she had we wrote it all out. It's okay. There's some things that being my child, you're going to have to also do. So first day of school, she's over there with her friends, and then all of her friends run up to me. They're like, oh, Dr. Murphy, and they're hugging me and stuff. And she was standing alone. So then she walked over and she's like, okay. And I hugged her, and that was that. Like, the boundaries were done. She had zero problem with it. By the time they were both like a sophomore and senior, I would walk through the cafeteria and kiss them on their forehead when I walked by them. But there were some issues, like if some of their friends got in trouble, they would sometimes try to come and advocate for them. And I would say, remember the boundaries we talked about, you guys, I can't talk about this. So we talked a lot about what each year looked like with my personal children. And I talked to the staff too, whoever their teachers were. I was like, you can go to someone else if you have an issue, with any of my children. Please don't come to me with it unless it's something that I really need to deal with as a parent. You can call their father, because I wasn't married to their father. I was like, you can call him. So it was a lot of talks. It worked out really well for me. I mean, my name is on their promotion certificate and their high school graduation diploma. So there was a lot of good to it, but a lot of talking ahead of time on what are the appropriate boundaries. Parents, parents, they'll call you whenever, stop you in the street. So whenever I went out to dinner, I went outside of where my community was and things like that. It was difficult, but at the same time, I think the good weighed out the bad, because I truly was a community principal. Like, I was in the community, kind of what Cynthia was saying, that's how she kind of sees her role as being in the community. And I was in the community all the time, which helped me be more effective, I think, because I really understood the parents and the kids I'd known for so long. So I'd say, do you need me to call your mom? Like, what are you doing right now? And they're like, no. And so there's a lot of great to it. And I felt like it overshadowed the not so great.
Great, thank you. Any other people?
I have a question. So yeah, we've kind of run the spectrum of how much we share personally and not personally. And I'm wondering, like how you might dial it back if there's ever been a time where you're like, ooh, gosh, maybe like we're a little too chummy, and now I don't think this is like productive for you or productive for me, or perhaps that like glimpse into my personal life was meant to be productive, but now it's kind of just not functioning in the way that I envisioned it. So can anyone speak to sort of like renegotiating that? And I feel like some of us have had to do that. I've had to have done that coming back from Zoom land, where like we don't need everyone seeing our spaces. And now we're just people, and they don't need to know about our dogs, though they're great.
I can share. I don't know if this is the best answer, but there have been several occasions throughout, my 20 years in this organization where I, because I've been at almost every level in the organization, there are people who were my peers at the time, we were friends, and as I moved up, I had to figure out how to recalibrate. And specifically when there were potential performance issues or discipline issues, and I would say it's very hard for me. I've tried not to make it a very abrupt, because I thought, optically and also just culturally, I didn't think that was the right thing to do, an abrupt conversation. Like, from here forward, we're not hanging out like this. I would just kind of slowly start to distance myself, inviting people less to things, etc. A couple of times I had to have explicit conversations. I can remember very clearly in my early years as a principal, one of my teachers still is my best friend, and she was very upset that I wasn't sharing certain things with her, and I had to tell her, when we signed on for this job together, we agreed that it was professional first when we're at work, and there are things I cannot share with you. And if you are not okay with that, given my role and your role, then we need to have a different conversation about the relationships we can and cannot have personally. That was probably the hardest conversation I have, and it worked out well because we're still friends today. But in most other places, it was just kind of slowly distancing myself once I sensed that there was an issue. That was my strategy. Whether that was the best strategy or not, it definitely saved me being in compromising situations with folks that were, either having performance or other issues at work.
Honesty is good.
Yeah, sometimes making the implicit explicit is important so that there's no misunderstanding. But Chelsea, I was wondering, is there a particular constituent group that you feel like you, or a person in particular that you feel like you were to blur the line and now are trying to pull back?
No, well, yes and no. So I'm not in leadership. I'm an educator and I teach wellness. So it's a lot of like, I feel like the most canceled position in a school because we're talking about sex and drugs and consent and identity and DEI and social justice and, mindfulness and liberation and all these things. And so, part of that is, in order to have students open up, right, you have to be able to give a bit of yourself as well. So it's sort of towing that line. And we talk about it a lot, like what's fair and what's not. And sort of what we've decided is if the information that's being shared is for the service of the student, and at the end of sharing that, they don't feel as though they have to take care of me or the person who shared it, then that's good information to have. But again, it can check all those boxes and students can still view it in a different way, as if like, now we're going to be besties. So yeah, I was also just wondering too, with parents, sometimes parents come, I have example, I'm thinking of one parent who's having a lot of issues with her son. And initially I was able to talk it out with her, and then I don't even teach her son, but like, I'm sort of the ally, and she feels as though I'm the ally in the school. And so sort of being like, okay, like, out of respect for my colleagues, I can't continue to like hear this out. So yeah, just sort of navigating, being personable and being sort of transcending a clear box, because this is like a new role and a new program in a school, but also like giving people a space where they can feel vulnerable. And maybe there's no answer to that because it's sort of unfolding with each individual person, but just seeing like that anecdote was really helpful. And just seeing from other people's experiences.
I mean, I could share a little bit now that you put some frame or context around it. At our school, we're very relationship driven. Well, at my former school. And so, I mean, we kind of knew everything about each other because we constantly like build community and did activities that were very intentional about us getting to know who we are as people, and just it made us really, really close. And so some of the strategies we adopted, we did through the Educare Foundation ACE initiative, where we did actual full retreats with students to just build their social emotional connectedness. And I was at a school with 70% boys, Latino and Black students, mostly males in South Central. And so we'd have a lot of fights and all that stuff. So we did a lot of intentional work on relationship building. And part of that was students really sharing some really deep things. And we did it through trained facilitators. We always had one teacher with 10 students. So one staff member with 10 kids, typically one of their teachers, because we wanted teachers to see the students as human first and understand the student struggles, but also the teachers had to share. So we would do a pre-training with the staff. The staff knew that they were going to be asked to share. They would go through the prompts of what they're going to share. And then the kids were told ahead of time that we're obviously mandated reporters if anything is brought up that is going to cause concern or anything that, you know, the staff's going to handle. And we would debrief at the end of each session and give feedback to the facilitators on what worked, what didn't work around student mental health and safety. Especially our psychiatric social worker was very involved sometimes, very concerned sometimes with what kids would bring up as they shared very personal things. And so, yeah, oftentimes that led to us having to do suicidal ideation assessments and, you know, reporting suspected child abuse. But at the same time, we created a space for kids to be able to know that there are adults around them that they can trust. And I'm telling you, some of my students presented 2 weeks ago with Dr. Victor Rios, and when they talked about how that worked and the trust they built with teachers and their advisories, how teachers were like lifesavers for them. They had really close, meaningful relationships. And I think our teachers learned, they went from this is my personal life, I don't share it, to learning in what ways and in what context and in a structured context you can have those conversations and build like a strong sense of community. And I think that was for our community and our space was really like vital.
Thank you. Yeah, that was really helpful. I think that sort of speaks to kind of the environment that this is occurring in. So thank you.
Great. Somebody has their hand. Laura?
I was just closing my blinds. Sorry.
Hard to tell sometimes. Okay, let's just shift a little bit for a few moments. Deborah Eduardo was here a few weeks ago and she talked to us, and her area is really mental health. That's what she did when she was at LAUSD. But she noticed that during the pandemic, there were a lot more emotional problems and people, parents were acting out much more and so on. And I think that this has a large impact on the professionals who deal with them. That's a beautiful cat. Okay, so I wondered if the speakers could speak to that. What was the impact on your personal lives of 2 years of pandemic?
I can jump in. So, you know, I think probably a lot of what I'll say, people will feel resonates with them because we sort of all went through it together. And then of course we all did it in our own specific way. And I think for me as both, you know, as educators, we want to take care of people. That's sort of what drives us, right? It's a calling and it feels very personal and those relationships are important. And if we don't take care of ourselves, we can really get lost and consumed by that. And I think also being the leader of a school and wanting to make sure everybody else's welfare was seen to, it meant that I had to be both like more intentional about taking care of my own like physical and mental health. And also that I put my head down and got through it. And then it's sort of in the aftermath that I felt like I had this kind of repercussions. And even though I was trying to like titrate grief along the way and feel my feelings, I have felt like in this spring, I really felt like I had hit the wall like a marathon where I, and I couldn't, and I will say that after the first sort of few months of the pandemic, I decided like actively, like I'm going to take care of myself physically, I'm going to exercise, and I'm going to meditate, and I'm going to really work on my sleep. I'm going to eat right. Like I called it aggressive self-care. I'm sure there's a better term for that, but I didn't want to be consumed by my role and the role in the middle of this crisis. And so, but I never felt like I could get the well filled again. And then I would like claw my way to a break, but we didn't even have breaks for the first year. We were working through every through every break to try to anticipate, because we couldn't see more than 5 feet in front of us. And I do think it took a toll on, I've always been able to, you get into leadership positions by just putting your head at working hard, saying yes to everything. And then that as a strategy just didn't work anymore. I just was working as hard as I could. And it wasn't, there was so much out of our control. So I'll say that like, more recently, I just kept thinking like, when am I going to get to the break that's going to make it all better? I thought it was going to be spring break. And then everyone in my family got COVID except for me. And so I was like staying away from them and taking care of them and doing all this stuff. And, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is not what I needed it to be different, right? That's like the hallmark of COVID. I need this situation to be different. And it was, so I don't know what happened. I had a shift, and I think it was, I'm involved in another mentorship program where I mentor, women leaders who are, looking for their next leadership opportunity. And there's something about spending time I just went this past weekend and I thought, oh, why did I do this? I'm going to be even more tired. I have to travel and I'm not going to sleep. And there's something about engaging with other women and mentoring them actively that somehow filled my well that I didn't expect. And so that's made me feel a little bit, I came back, it's very busy. I don't know if in charter schools and non-public schools, like you call it the 100 days of May, but in independent schools, we call the 100 days of May. There's so much going on, so many celebrations and things. And I don't know why it shifted so abruptly. Like I was just waiting for it to happen, and then it did. And I was so, I'm so grateful. I mean, maybe it's only going to last till like tomorrow and then I'm going to be deflated again. But or it was like I was just training and training and training for it to sort of finally catch up and take me somewhere else. But I think it's been hard. It's been hard as a leader through this. And there have been times when I've said like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is not like the fulfillment. It was hard to feel fulfilled by, becoming a public health expert and dealing with constituents, all of whom are disappointed in you at different times or hate what you're doing or accuse you of putting their lives on the line, or, or their kids are struggling or suffering. There haven't been a lot of joys that we've been able, highlights that we've been able to really take us along like in a usual year. And I think also worrying about the people who work with me and making sure they're okay, because I need them to be sustained too and to move into next year in a good place. But it's just been a lot, I'll be honest, it's been a lot. And I have questioned whether I want to keep doing this. And as things continue to get better, those questions have been subsiding more, but I know I will do it differently. I'm not working 7 to 7 anymore. And I'll never do that again because it's just not worth it for my family, myself. Anyway, that's my sort of experience with crisis management and mental health.
Thank you.
I'll jump in maybe after that too. Like absolutely experienced all of those, similar, lows. Yeah. And I think, probably anyone who has to report to a board meeting during that period. And parents, I know you all know, like we all know, like parents were so distraught, like, oh my God, open the school. We're not, you've got to open. So all of those things were definitely traumatizing at times. But a positive side of this is after years of doing the 7 to 7 and doing it away from home, and my husband also travels for his work quite a bit. There were many times like I really just loved being at home with my family. Like even though we're running a school from the kitchen table, there were really moments where I just was so thankful to actually, get to know my husband again after many years of barely seeing him. And even though I think we both have a sense of what the other does, I mean, we actually got to see each other in action. And I mean, so from some standpoints, it's like, oh, this was even a whole new depth of understanding about a person that, I feel like I can know everything about you and vice versa. So some silver linings to the, what was really so tough about all of us being in isolation and, doing those never ending Zoom meetings, and one thing just flowed into the next and everybody either seemed to expect it or the situation demanded it. But again, I completely agree with what Laura said about kind of reevaluating and not doing things that way anymore. And I think we had a kind of a starter of this is, again, we've got an opportunity to do a restart. And I'm trying to, I think consciously coming back from the pandemic, I really, tried to spend a lot of time journaling and thinking about, what do I want to do differently, and how, since we're, kind of coming at this now from a different angle, or, kind of reassessing things, what would I really like to change about my work day, or, how I do things that'll make it more fulfilling, and if not fulfilling, just sustainable, like something I can keep doing. Because we all do hit a point where you give and you give, and at some point you just have to step back and say, I've got to take this moment for me, just to regroup, because we all hear you can't help others if you actually are in a position that you can't help yourself. So just I think trying to reevaluate, find ways to center ourselves and re-enter, feeling like we've got a new perspective on things. But I so love what Laura said about, again, this, it's rejuvenating to be with other people and talk these things through, and just know that you're not alone. Like we were all experiencing terrible frustration and downs, but also finding silver linings to terrible situations is a really good thing too. When you can do it, you can't always, but when you can, it is helpful.
Great, thank you.
I'll share a lot of the same sentiments that Pam and Laura shared. I resonate with me. I think it's probably important to call out that everybody on this call in the field of education, we're still struggling through this period, whatever this period is. Just when we thought everything was okay, January hit, and January felt like a whole month where there was just a new explosion based on the surge and what do we do? And so, everybody in education, there's a reason why there's hundreds of thousands of less teachers in the pipeline across the country in the last year compared to pre-pandemic, why superintendents across major districts are stepping down because it is hard and it continues to be hard. And people are navigating through their own trauma, and those who are closest to students and families are now experiencing secondhand trauma where they're trying to support them with their, with the trauma they're still carrying. And so I think it's important to acknowledge we're still going through this and still trying to figure it out. And I think everybody's a little bit not okay, and on different days I'm okay, and on other days I'm like, why is this triggering me? I don't understand why I'm so upset by this. And so I think it's just, I've tried to give myself permission to be not okay in my own private space and acknowledge that that's human, and also remember that other people are having those same experiences. I think the pandemic in particular was hard because personal and private were the same place. All I did was walk from my office into my living room and back into my office. And so it was hard to disconnect because there was no separation. I actually didn't realize it till the first day I went back in the office, and I was like, my shoulders didn't hurt as much. I felt like, oh, I could walk to lunch somewhere. So, I think that part was particularly hard. I think for me, and this could be my own personal thing, I'm a very like emotional and personal person, but I try very hard in leadership not to, because I'm aware of the woman stereotype, being a woman, and the stereotypes of being emotional and unstable. And so really trying to put on a brave face. And during the pandemic, people needed a sense of calm and direction and a sense that everything was going to be okay. And I needed to pull it together and try to provide that sense for people. You know, I struggled through it. I wasn't perfect. But I think, you know, we're still navigating that. And many times doing things, I feel like a chief medical officer more than I do a superintendent. I'm making medical decisions about masks, no masks, vaccine mandates or not, that, really stretch you and make it hard to feel like you're being successful. But I think I would say some things that I've learned that I've tried to do for myself. Technology has taught us a lot in the pandemic. So if I want to get in the car and head home for my 5 o'clock meeting instead of sitting in the office, I'm going to do it. If a meeting can be over Zoom, that's what it's going to be. We had all of our work-wide professional development this year was all virtual. Everybody got to stay at home. It was a pupil-free day. Stay home, we'll deliver PD virtually. Like that alone gave people like, wow, okay, that feels different. And so I think for myself and for others, trying to leverage technology in different ways. So it's not about having your seat in your office all the time. It's getting the work done together and doing it effectively and efficiently. I think to the point that Laura and Pam made, I'm still struggling a little bit with the balance myself, and you are taking on everybody else's, everybody's mad for one reason or another, even now, and wanting to be there for people, but also acknowledging like this is not good for my mental health either. And so trying to find space. So things that I've done, I leave my work cell phone at home most weekends. I mean, I'll walk to the bathroom and check it several times during the day, but I try to separate and keep work separate on weekends. I try not to work past 6, 7 o'clock on most weeknights, and just try to create those boundaries to give yourself a second to breathe, because you're not going to be able to provide that sense of calm and direction if you're not calm yourself. So still figuring it out, but those are a few things I've done.
I guess I'll agree with the word traumatizing that Pamela shared. It was absolutely traumatizing. Thinking about it makes me cry, really, because we were at a place at my school in the fall of 2019 when we had figured it all out. It had taken us 5 years. Like all the little tweaks we have made, all the adjustments, all the programs, we were finally at a place where we were excited for kids to take the S back for the first time because we had figured it all out. And we were just in such a good place. And then the pandemic hit and it all fell apart. I mean, it all fell apart. And being in a community that had the highest COVID death rate and living in the community with the second highest COVID death rate, I lost my students. Like they stopped coming to school. They started working. We tried as a staff to just, what are things we can do? UTLA agreed to certain schedules, but we knew that they wouldn't work for our students. So we modified the schedules. Our teachers committed to making a change to be online with kids all day long so that the kids had something to do. We tried to get as creative as we could, but it was really difficult going out to homes, trying to get students to come back, begging students to come back. I started figuring out how to hire students I hired 14 students to work for the school. I'm like, you need a job, come work, I'll pay you to tutor 9th graders. I'll pay you to, just getting really creative about meeting the needs of students. We surveyed them and asked them what's going on, what's happening with connection, what's happening with the platforms teachers are using, which platforms work, which platforms don't. Our region was the region, and it was on a school board presentation that had the highest use of the Wi-Fi spots that were given because there's zero broadband access because they're low-income communities. So companies feel like we're not going to make money from building towers in those areas. So the kids' Wi-Fi didn't work. So they had to do most of their logging in and assignments through their cell phones. And so what we ended up doing, I think, once we figured out that most students were on their cell phone, I think in December of 2020 was all the assignments had to be cell phone friendly, so that students had an opportunity to complete them. And that was just from surveying students and finding out like what is working, what is not. And so just going back to like really basic things, for me, I started like thinking I need to advocate for the students because people need to know what is happening in like students' lives, specifically in certain communities. And I reached out a lot to friends that I know from NPR, like different journalists, to push out stories around the fact that kids were starting to work, talking to assembly members about things we can do for students to make sure that it doesn't impact them academically, especially our kids that were four-year bound. I mean, anything and everything I posted about jobs. This is how I use my social media. I would post things that I needed and people would respond, people from the district, we saw your post, what do you need? Here's someone from the office, they'll help you through it right now. Like what, you know, we heard you're having, the kids are struggling with fingerprinting to get processed. Like we found a location, we'll open it up for them, just make sure they get here, you know? Like all those things I was able through social media, like advocate a lot, get board members to read some of the posts, and folks would comment, teachers would comment on my posts. So then everyone could see that this is an issue, not just crazy Cynthia, like talking smack. And so people would be like, yes, same at my school, same at my school. We need this, we need that. And that was just on that end of it. I think with my staff, I think at the end of 2021, I almost like left to take mental health, like the last 2 months of the school, you know, and you know, and I'll cry in front of my staff. I'm like, oh, but you know, my lowest paid workers, the most vulnerable of the district, were the ones who were asked to work throughout the entire pandemic, whether that was through food distribution, whether that was coming in to hand out laptops, Chromebooks, like they were on site the entire time pretty much, along with the administrators for the most part. Now, I had been working with them all year while the kids were virtual, like on the campus pretty much, like taking care of all these things. And so when it was time for the other certificated members to come back, they all kind of like my support team went off on me, like that I wasn't taking their safety seriously, that like one of them wanted her own office because she didn't want to feel safe with someone else. And she wanted to be able to take off her mask. And I was like, I was so like, first of all, I felt attacked. And I was like, you know, they thought they were doing like an RJ. I'm like, this is not how you run an RJ circle. So whoever planned this out failed, because you need to let me know that this is going to happen. And I have to agree to be in this process. But they had like a little circle by support staff, like, we feel that you don't care. And it was not even that. The district didn't have policies on what happens to counselors when they return. What are the regulations for small office staff? Like, they didn't have anything but what was the classroom requirements for COVID. And so I was like, what I only presented what has been given to me, and there's only so much space that we have, and I can't make decisions at this point. Being close with people, I can't decide that I'm going to let you work from home arbitrarily and you won't. And the teachers have kids too. Like, I can't make those type of relational decisions. I have to stick to the letter of what's in this memo. And they felt that that meant I was being very cold with them. And what happened, we usually work these things out. And I was like, not with COVID, not with a pandemic. And I like cried, I think for probably 3 days straight, because I'm like, here we are, like risking our lives, you know, coming in every day. And with my office techs, like who are getting paid like a third of your salary, who've been coming every day, who've been exposing themselves every day. And like, you guys can't see that. And I was honest, once I recovered from my trauma, I met with each one individually. Like, I was upset, you know, and I'm like, I have to be honest, it was upsetting because we've been working here the whole time and you guys never offered to come and help. Like, you guys never offered to come and expose yourselves. You guys took advantage of the fact that you didn't have to come in. But now you're coming in with all this like, oh my God, what are we gonna do when we've been here? Like, we're the ones scared that you're coming in after we've been safe for a year with the protocols we've been following. It was very tense. And I thought it was just me. And I was like, I failed as a leader. Like, I cannot believe this is happening after so many years where I've literally left my kids alone for nights at a time, you know, giving to the school and the community. And I will cry, it's okay. I was so hurt by it. But I'm glad I stayed because I realized how much that fear and just like the tension, it wasn't just at my school. When I was open and honest with everybody, this is happening to me, like, and everyone's like, oh my God, it happened to me too. I need someone to talk to. Like, so many of, I mean, Dr. Lazo, who hired me, she's a principal now, she experienced the same thing. And I was just like, oh my God. And because I shared it, because I was like, hey, I feel like a failure, and I was open and I shared it, other people felt like, hey, it's happening to me too. I thought I was the only one. And it's like, no, it was very, I mean, you guys were in those spaces. You guys know what I'm talking about. It was a very tense time, and like a lot of rebuilding, a lot of building that culture, that safety, like all those things had to like get started again. And so I'm glad I didn't leave, you know, I stayed through. And then I'm glad I stayed. I left my school in November, but we were, my daughter's here trying to check me out crying. But I stayed until like November because I got a different position. But like, I love my team and we made it through, and I understood then that it was just that the combustion of everything that was happening at the moment. And they were all upset that I was leaving. They're like, no, but I also realized like I gave all I could give. And I think that's also really important to know when it's your time for the sake of the school community, that it's like, I did what I could. I don't know if I have another 5 years to get it back to where it needs to be, but I'm there as their director. So I'm there to support the school all the time. And the good thing is that in my role, I get to support schools like mine, and I see new principals at their sites having so many issues and problems. And every time I go to my old school, I'm like, you guys better be nice. You're being nice, right? To each other. And they're like, oh my God, yeah, like everything's smooth. And I'm like, thank God. That's the only thing that I have comfort, that they have transitioned into new leadership in a very smooth way. And yeah, but it was very traumatizing, all of it. And we need sabbaticals for educators, like immediately. So
You're absolutely right. Right now, we need to take a little different kind of sabbatical, actually. We are going to get into small groups. So there'll be a panelist or two for each of the small groups. Let's go until 8:10. And at that point, the people in the academy can just go on break to 8:30. And if the panelists could come back to the main room, I'd like to talk to you for a minute. Okay, so Heidi. Can't hear you. Charmin?
Is that working now?
Yeah.
Oh, I was just so happy how candid they were.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I told in our small group that, you know, it's really nice to hear really successful people in our field be really candid about how hard things are, because, you know, we're hard on ourselves. And so I really appreciated their being candid.
I talked to them afterwards and they said, well, can we meet again and talk? They meant just meet among themselves and talk, because often you don't have someone to tell these things to. Significant others get real tired of hearing it. And there are a lot of things you can't tell people you work with. So I said, sure, I'll organize a tea on Zoom. But anyway, so Laura said that we should talk about differences between male and female leadership during the pandemic. So if you want, we could do it either as a whole group or in your mentoring circles. Or I thought of these two questions, which I really like. One, you know, you go to work on Monday morning and somebody says to you, how was your weekend? Now, I think if you say it to a male educator versus a female educator, you're going to get different answers. The male may say, oh, it was fine. You know, I went to dinner. I did this. I did that. I played golf on Sunday. Chances are the female leader isn't going to say that. She's took care of her kids. She took care of her parents. She did all the work related to her school, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really different. And I think the pandemic just made it 10 times worse. And I think all of you have learned a lot of lessons from it. And I hope you've written them down somewhere because it's so easy to forget. So mentoring circles, differences between males and female educators during a pandemic. Does that work for you? Okay, Heidi, can you put everybody in their mentoring circles and come back at 10 to 9? Well, I've learned a lot in the session tonight. One thing, upsides to the pandemic, we got closer to our kids, whether we wanted to or not. Two, divide wasn't always male, female. Sometimes it was if males had children at home, they were also at home with the children. Three, the tension hasn't gone away. Because right now we don't seem to know if we're in a pandemic or not. Like, I know, I'm just waiting for the next round because I can't believe it's over.
Next round already started, Linda.
I know.
I'm living it right now. Just started this week.
No,
Yep.
I'm part of a group. It's a mystery writers group. And I get email from them. But today I got like 8 or 9 within an hour or two. A lot of them had gone to a conference in Maryland last week. And this week, guess what? A lot of them have COVID and they're homesick. And those that aren't sick are waiting to get sick because they knew some of the people there who got COVID. So, but
The
it does,
sucky part that we're seeing is the kids are getting super sick with this strain,
yeah.
like really high temperatures.
Mm.
So that's a little worrisome from what we're seeing this week. We've only been back from spring break. This is our second week. So we're just seeing the spring break sickness, but the kids are really sick, high fevers, and a lot of throwing up. So I'm a little worried about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't know what we can do about it. Apparently not much, because a lot of the conference required that people show proof of vaccination, including boosters and wearing masks. But there were social events where there was a lot of eating and drinking, so they weren't always wearing their masks. But nobody seems to be wearing masks now.
That's frightening. At the end of May, I'm going to my niece's wedding in Boston. I've never been to the East Coast. Well, that's not Washington, D.C. a couple years back, but other than that, it's my second trip to the East Coast. I might be coming back with a gift.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
My daughter lives in Boston. She's a nurse and she's vaccinated and boosted, and she went out for one night and didn't have her mask on, and then she got COVID.
Oh boy.
Nobody in Massachusetts is really wearing their masks.
I was just in Rhode Island. I didn't see, besides me, I saw no masks.
Yeah.
Like nobody, like a couple of Trader Joe's workers.
Yeah.
That was it. And then on the plane, the people were, the woman at the airport where I had a stopover was like, and just so you know, the unconstitutional mask mandate has been lifted. And I still had mine on just because I am doing that. But everybody who had a mask on when they walked on the plane to scan their thing, if you had a mask on, she didn't say hello to you. She only said hello to the people that didn't have masks on. So I did put that in my survey. I made sure I typed that up because that was rude. Because I don't want to spread anything to somebody. And that's why I'm doing what I do. But I thought that was horrible.
There's so much misinformation out there.
Really
Well, and then I heard about there was a flight where the mask mandate was canceled mid-flight. And so they just in the air, they announced it's okay.
I
to
was
take
on a
mask
flight
off.
like that.
That's crazy.
And the guy in front of me was like, you know what? I'm always going to remember this, like 9/11. And I was like,
oh my God.
what?
Oh,
How is that related? As I kept my mask on. And I just felt so bad for people who got on that flight thinking that maybe it was the first time they'd ventured out, right? Like, and I just felt.
Or they're with their kids or.
Yeah. And then everyone else is kind of, I'm like, don't look at me. Don't look at me funny because y'all know it didn't just stop because someone ruled something. Like, yeah, I was on a flight like that. I just felt so bad for so many people.
It's so weird because Monday morning I decided all the teachers should join in the hell I had lived for the weekend with all the COVID reports that came to me. And I just emailed my staff out and I said, hey, just want you to know, like, we've gone from 0 to 60. And I didn't mean 60 people. I meant like, we put on the gas and COVID is back. We had 0 COVID last week and we had 10 reported just over the weekend. And a lot of them were staff and their children. But the interesting thing was I told my teachers, I said, I want to remind you the number one way to avoid COVID is to wear a mask because none of them had been wearing masks, which is fine. I'm still wearing mine. My dad has been ill. I'm wearing my mask. I'm over 50. Guess what? I got my second booster already and I got my shingle shot. That's how I spent my spring break. So, but it was interesting. So many of my teachers put their mask back on. And guess what? 2 more of them who had positive kids are out tomorrow, probably positive also. So it's like, I'm like, no, not January again. I can't do January again.
And I gather finding subs is impossible.
Oh, we will end up canceling all our enrichment program again if we have to. That's what we did for the whole month of January.
Yeah.
We canceled enrichment and the enrichment teachers covered all the sick teachers. It was the only way to survive January.
Yeah, it's very strange times all the way around. Okay, so next time, which is May 3rd, we're going to talk about disrupting the status quo. And how do you do that? I mean, it's like ingrained in us. It takes a pandemic to destruct things. Okay, so we're having a group of 3 people come. They're from an organization within LAUSD, Humanizing Education for Equitable Transformation, otherwise known as HEET. And they're going to talk about what they do with 3 groups of high schools within LAUSD, how everything is focused on equity. I did list some readings and an online article to read, which I sent you the whole schedule. It's also up on on Google. So you can check that out and it should be interesting. But I don't know if anything can be more interesting than tonight, actually.
It was great.
Yeah. And I want to thank you all for participating, for your comments. And I'll see you on the 3rd. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Everyone.
Night.
Take care.
Yeah.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.